Wilde, Shaw, Joyce, some of the greatest storytellers in the English language have emerged from the Emerald Isle of Ireland. And who better to talk about Irish drama and the art of storytelling than this week's guest, Dermot Horan. With a 30-year career at Irish broadcaster RTE behind him, Dermot has become one of the most experienced and respected acquisitions executives in international television. He's picked up some of the greatest shows in TV history and is a key figure in the EBU. And his role has expanded to match his skill set, as he's now leading the charge at RTE in building a drama slate that can match the stature of US and UK dramas, with shows like Kin proving that delivery can match that ambition. Dermot and I talked about his early career, the importance of building relationships that stand the test of time, what makes a good buyer and a good salesperson, and who he would take with him to a desert island if he was ever lost. Enjoy! Hi Dermot, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Danny. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you doing?
Yeah, all very good. Yes. To the calm before the storm. I was away for a few days, but now I'm about to head off to the London screenings.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that a bit later in the podcast. But I always like to start with a fun question, and in this case, it is: in your long career in acquisitions, you have brought some of the most iconic TV series to RTE, including the blockbuster hit show Lost.
Mhm.
If you found yourself stranded on a desert island, which three executives from the TV business would you choose to have with you and to help you form a team to escape the island?
Hmm. See, there are lots of people in the industry that if the island was not a threat and we were just having a few glasses of rosé, I'd like to have their company. But I was thinking, now, who would you like to have along who actually could help you escape? So you need people who are resourceful, who don't panic, but also are a little bit of a laugh and actually can keep your spirits up. So, uh, I'll give you a few ideas. So, the first one is a guy called Frederick Lewin. Now, Frederick is head of acquisitions for NRK Norway. He has a very dry sense of humor. He's extremely methodical. He's extremely logical. I mean, the Norwegians, as you know, they only work from kind of 8 till 4 in the summer, 8 till 3, and yet he manages to be incredibly efficient during that time. He's also, and this is an unknown thing, he also is a fencer, and in fact has represented Norway. I won't say over which age category, but he has in veterans fencing. So I thought actually to have somebody who can wield a machete or wield a sword, whilst at the same time having a sense of humor is actually a really good person. And he's a good mate of mine as well. Um, the second person, because we need to kind of mix the genders, another mate of mine from the acquisitions game is Mignon Hoosman from MPO Holland. Mignon is just one of those people that everybody likes. She's a great team player. She never is kind of out for herself. She also has a musical background. So again, somebody to cheer you up because, it's very easy to panic in these situations. And she can mother us all as well, which I think every now and again, you might need. And the third person, and again, this is somebody who would cheer me up, but actually would be somebody, that we need to get to stop talking now and again, would be Paul Heaney. Because Paul, London Irish, good, very, very good mate of mine, can pretty much talk about anything and everything. And again, would just give you that sense of humor just to get you through the low patches when you're going round in circles and you're still on that bloomin' island and you can't find your way. You want somebody just to keep your spirits up. So I think those three, yeah, I think we could probably find an escape route.
Very good. And Paul, of course, a previous guest on Here Comes Pod.
Okay.
So there's a good connection. So he's already got the Here Comes Pod endorsement. So
Yeah.
that sounds like a very strong team. Having been away with you in a group of four, I know that you would be a fantastic contributor as well to keep spirits high. So yeah, I think
Yeah, and I think I'm also a reasonably good organizer because I was the person when we were all stranded in Cannes during the Icelandic ash storm, and there were seven of us that I ended up calling the Intrepid Seven from RTE, all stranded there. And yeah, I was the one who ended up organizing our trip home, which took over 3 days across land and sea and train. So yeah, so I have a bit of experience in this regard.
okay, there you go. So you are in fact experienced when it comes to this particular question. I didn't even know, but yeah, you would be the perfect person to have on the island. A lot of people in our world will know that your brother Tim has also had a very high profile career in the
Yeah.
TV business. So was home a fertile breeding ground for successful TV executives when you guys were growing up, and were you negotiating rights deals around the kitchen table?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, my brother came in through kind of an advertising background and then into sports sponsorship, which then, but also he was fluent in Italian. That led him into a job at the BBC, handling Italy, where he did all the deals through Italian. And I do remember at one stage, a previous BBC boss who should remain nameless said, "Oh, Tim, I think I'll come along on your sales trip to Rome." I said, and I hope you don't mind, Tim, but can you do all the negotiations through English? And Tim said, well, I can do that. And, the guys from Ride do understand English, but I'll get a better price if I do it through Italian. And he's spot on because, the Italians, that's the way they are. They love that. So, but no, I suppose the great thing was that our parents never put any pressure on us to do the things that all our probably schoolmates did, which was become an accountant, become a doctor. In our case, our dad was an architect, but actually, there was never any pressure for us to follow in the footsteps, except the careers guy as a teacher. Occasionally, you'd say, "Well, listen, there's a family firm to go into there," but we didn't really want to do that. We both were a little bit more creative, and even when I was in school, I was directing plays, and I used to even at one stage I thought I might be a football commentator and I had one of those old-fashioned cassette recorders that you have to almost break your thumb putting down to press record. I'd be doing, Beckenbauer majestically comes out, the sweeper, the position that we're not familiar with in England and Ireland. To whoever, and I, oh Christ taking the ball to Naskins, what a score, so all of that kind of stuff. So I was always interested in performing. When I went to university, I went to Trinity College in Dublin, and I got very involved in the drama society there that spawned a lot of really good actors and directors. In fact, one of the guys I was in college with, Ian Fitzgibbon, is directing our new drama show called The Walsh Sisters, based on the Marion Keyes novels. So that's come full circle. Got involved in a lot of magazines and actually radio, which in those days in Ireland was pirate radio. There was just RTE, and then there was pirate radio. So everybody just worked in pirate radio, and ministers went on pirate radio. It's just they didn't have proper licensing. And then I got a job in Granada Television, and that's how I started in promos. And promos is a great way of starting in TV because you learnt how a television company works. And in a little 30-second promo, you pretty much learn all the skills that's involved in making a program. You actually have to find the material, you have to script it, you've got to edit it, you've got to put music to it, you've got to clear the music. And from a rights perspective, you've got to put graphics on it, and then you've got to schedule it and place it in the schedule and trying to maximize, why ITV viewers can watch that program at a particular time. So that's what I started doing. It was a really, really good way of starting in TV. And at the time, there was a guy called Joe Rigby who was head of program planning in Granada as it was then. And this is in the days of the ITV network. But the number of people who came through promos that guy Joe Rigby discovered. I mean, Colin Callender, who went on to, run HBO, David Lidiment went on to run the Network Centre. Stephen Leahy went to set Action Time and developed Busman's Holiday and worked in the Krypton Factor with me. And, so it was a really, really good fertile ground. And then I went on to become a researcher and work on things like the Krypton Factor and Busman's Holiday and stuff like that. And then I became a freelance producer, went back to Ireland because my brother always wanted to work in England. I always wanted to work in Ireland, curiously. And then did some work for Ulster Television. And then RTE had a producer director training course, and I'd been producing, but I'd never directed per se. I directed promos, but never directed a whole program. And it was a really, really good 4.5 month, really full-time course. And off the back of it, then became an in-house producer in RTE, and worked my way up, produced holiday series, produced fashion series, and then I became head of children's programs. And that really got me involved in the international business because, you suddenly realize I'm not going to be able to produce anything, either animated or live action in kids without having international partners. And that's just the way it operates. So, and I was only there for a year, but we did 3 drama co-productions, loads of animation, got to MIPCOM and just got a feel for that side of the business and loved it. And I probably would have stayed there, except for the fact that our then head of acquisitions, Bill Harper, was retiring. And so my boss, Liam Miller, said to me, well, have you ever thought about doing acquisitions? And I said, well, I'm really enjoying kids programming at the moment. We're doing so much. And he said, well, these jobs don't come up very often in RTE. There's only ever been one head of acquisition. So, right. So as it stands, Danny, I'm only the second head of acquisitions in RTE. But then since then, I've taken on board lots of other things, and now I look after our co-productions, particularly dramas and comedy co-productions. And I'm vice chair of the European Broadcasting Union TV Committee, and I look after our archives. So the thing about small broadcaster like RTE is you do have to become a bit of a jack of all trades. You don't have that sheer volume of staff that everybody just does one job. And that actually suits me because it keeps me interested in the business.
And so, how did you learn the acquisitions business, having come from a different part of the RTE and the different
Well,
part
I
of...
had to learn it. I had to learn it. I used to think a window was something that was, I looked out of. But thankfully, Bill Harper was kept on as a consultant. And so I went along to my first couple of markets with him. I went to what was then the Monte Carlo market, which is a very leisurely market, actually, but it was a great introduction because all the Hollywood studios were there in suites in the Loews Hotel as it was then. And you had time to talk. You didn't actually have to make appointments. And then the next one was MIP. And it was interesting because Bill, who's sadly now deceased, but Bill said to me, "No, Dermot, I'm going to give you some advice. Don't make appointments at MIP and MIPCOM." He said, "Keep them keen. Just go to those ones you want to go to." And that probably worked for him in, his heyday because, there were far fewer broadcasters around. There might be 1 or 2 broadcasters per market. And you could go buy a stand and say, by the way, can we have a meeting? But I soon realized, and I'm kind of too organized anyway. That's the way I'm DNA'd and wired, that I needed to organize appointments. And I needed to make those appointments together with my assistant rather than other people filling your diary. So now I have a great assistant, Jeanette, and I have a kind of a legendary diary that is organized day by day. You have been part of this, Danny, geographically. So, all the Riviera stands and, all the fourth floor. If you meet outside, it has to be first thing or at lunchtime or last thing because they don't have to go through security. So you can make those half-hour appointments actually be half an hour rather than 15 minutes. So, yeah, so I had to learn it, but I learned it pretty quickly. When it came to producing and directing, I always felt I was more of an executive producer. That was always my strength. And so, and I've always liked doing deals, I've liked putting, finance plans together. And, so yeah, acquisition's been a lot of fun.
So your next evolution at RTE was as director of broadcast and operation. So as you said, adding different components to
Yeah.
your role there. Now, although Ireland is not a massive country, it's a complex one due to its proximity to the UK with terrestrial overspill. It's got a satellite pay TV behemoth
Mm.
distributing channels with dedicated Irish advertising sales, commercial and public service competitors, and the complexity of the Good Friday Agreement that ended the Troubles in the North, which had implications for the South as well. And this was all before the streaming revolution, of course.
Yeah.
So, what strategies did you develop to navigate all of these challenges and maximize the value of the programming that you acquired? Because that must have been a challenge.
Yeah, and it's been a challenge from day one because people said to me, "Oh, the streamers," and I said, "Well, no, we've been dealing with Sky from day one of me being in this job. So Sky as a broadcaster, they look upon UK and Ireland in the same way they look upon Germany and Austria as almost a single territory. So we've always had to take it on the chin that if Sky comes in and buys something, they're probably going to buy UK and Irish rights. So what you have to do is you have to get in early, you have to express your interest in something, and see how it plays out in the UK. And, if it's going to BBC or ITV or Channel 4 or Channel 5, then you're in business. And if Sky comes knocking and they pay the big bucks, then you have to have a plan B, which is try and find something else that can go into that stock. So we've lived with that all along. As I say, Netflix makes it a bit more complex now. Now the VOD world is even more complex, but there is a level of non-exclusivity about it. Whereas actually what I was dealing with the likes of Sky was if Sky bought I don't know, a cop series from CBS, they were buying it for UK and Ireland. You were completely excluded from it. Whereas now with the streamers, it counts someone as being non-exclusive, but then you have to look at the impact that that may have on the share in Ireland as well. So you're constantly weighing these things up. Good Friday Agreement that means that UK services are more available here and were more available in Northern Ireland, but not in the United Kingdom. And so there's been a lot of mission to explain. But once you've explained to people that actually RT is going to be in Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom, but it's actually there for peace and reconciliation. At the end of the day, Northern Ireland is 1.8 million people out of a UK population of 67 million. So generally people kind of recognize, listen, we understand there's a greater good to be looked after here. And I suppose it's like all these things, you're a smaller country and you are a smaller broadcaster than your near neighbours. And as I say, the same applies to the Austrians with the Germany and French-speaking Belgians with France. So what you've got to really do is make sure that you're relevant and that you're there to buy. And over the years, I've always tried to have regular business with people so that we're not off the radar. I sometimes recognize that sometimes we get emails on a Friday afternoon, which can be very annoying if it's an aggressive counter. But actually, as often as not, you understand that somebody who's handling these big territories like the UK, maybe it comes to Friday lunchtime. Oh, right, I better look after Ireland now, my other territory. So we kind of take that on the chin. You're a smaller territory, which has disadvantages, but at the same time, it has advantages because you're, I think, less threatening. And also, I think sometimes distributors use us and other Irish broadcasters like as a sounding board for the UK. They recognise we're different and we are subtly different to the UK in terms of what's liked and disliked, but just in terms of what do you think of that show? The stakes are lower in Ireland, so maybe we're willing to have a bit more of an honest conversation with each other.
In July 2016, you stepped into the role of acting managing director of RTE
Mhm.
Television whilst the organisation went through a restructure. How did you find the experience of operating across the full range of the RTE television business?
Yeah, no, it was a challenge. I mean, I had been on the board of RT Television as was, and I knew this was only going to be for a year because the new Director General decided to kind of create a content division. And so television that was everything to do with TV, but we didn't really know what was going on in radio or in the orchestras or other parts of RTE. So this was an all-encompassing television that included in-house production, commissioning, acquisitions, sport, operations, press, advertising, everything. So it was a really, really interesting year. One thing I did do, and I would give anybody this advice, is I said to the then Director General, I'll do this, but I do want to retain my head of acquisitions role, and I want to keep doing that. Now, it meant I had some very, very long days and long hours that year, but it did mean that at the end of that year, there was somewhere for me to go back to. And then I also took on board co-productions at that point as well. So that's something, when you're asked to do an interim role, think what's going to happen at the end of it.
And does public service broadcasting bring unique challenges in general and also specifically in your acquisitions role? I know that, for example, in the when it comes to the BBC in the UK, some of their acquisitions decisions can sometimes prove to be controversial, and the press will talk about why is the BBC spending this money on acquisitions, that sort of thing. So I don't know if that happens in Ireland, and has that ever really impacted you?
Not a huge amount. I mean, the thing about RTE is that we're dual funded. So, we have always had the license fee, but we've always had advertising. And it's fluctuated. Sometimes advertising during the Celtic Tiger years was generating more money than the license fee. Now it's the reverse. But commercial revenue and sponsorship has always been part and parcel of RTE's revenue. And it's in our charter that we actually have to maximize our commercial revenue. So, therefore people will say, well, why are you buying home and away? I'm buying home and away because it gets bums on seats. And it's, by the way, it's sponsored and we're earning commercial revenue for a younger audience. So I think it's a bit different for us than it would be for the likes of the BBC, where they're, completely funded largely by the license fee. I suppose, yeah, I mean, our competitors, and they would say it, wouldn't they, when TV3 came into the market, initially run by CanWest, and yeah, they would have a go. But they were only having a go so they could get hold of the content. And there's enough content for a number of broadcasters anyway. So, we bat them back.
And you collaborate closely with other European public service broadcasters, and we've heard about the value of that if you ever get stranded on a desert island, for example. What are the similarities in approach? Where do the differences lie? And is it easy to reach consensus across such a diverse group of cultures and nations?
I find that we've a huge amount of common, the public broadcasters in Europe. I'm vice chair of the EBU TV committee, and we have members from across Europe. And remember, EBU is not the European Union; it's Europe. So BBC are there, and Norway are there, and Russia were there till recently. May come back at some stage. So
Possibly
it,
sooner
it,
than we thought, based on
Maybe,
recent
maybe, who
pronouncements.
knows? Who knows? So but you all see the similarities. Like if a right-wing government comes in without, I suppose this is a generalization, but often right-wing governments are hostile to public broadcasting. And they tend to maybe reduce their license fee or reduce CPI increases, that kind of stuff. So you immediately see if there's a number of right-wing governments who come in, you can see there's a number of countries that are going through the same thing. Other things which are more structural. So at the moment, RTE has announced as part of our 5-year strategy that we are going to be a smaller organization and we are going to commission more with the independent sector and make less in-house programming. Interestingly, YLE in Finland are doing exactly the same thing. So there's common cause. There's lots and lots of ways that you can exchange notes, exchange strategies, and that's a great thing. You don't need to employ consultants. I can ring somebody in Denmark's radio in Denmark or YLE in Finland, and I have people I can talk to.
In September 2017, your role was formalized in the title of Director of Acquisitions and Co-productions. How important have co-productions become to RTE?
Well, hugely. But when we say co-productions, back in the day, co-productions were kind of sometimes somebody else would develop something and then you might put a bit of money into it and then you get a credit on it. But actually now all our drama is co-produced. I can't think of, maybe bar the streamers, no drama is financed by a single individual entity anymore. So I think the good thing is I built up a whole network of contacts in the industry. And so I was able to work hand in glove with our head of drama, David Green, in putting together a development slate of drama, working with Irish producers that we could bring to the international market. So I think that's something that I've really, really enjoyed and continue to enjoy. But I think also we have changed the way that people perceive Irish television production to be. We always had a decent film industry, and we always, got getting nominated for Oscars for actors and directors, etc. But I think, since I got involved, and one of the things I was determined that we did is that we would bring international partners, which would allow us to have budgets that were, if not on a par with the BBC and ITV, we're getting close to, would allow us to have the production values and put the development money into scripted content that would compete with anything else you might see across our competitors. And so the first series we would have been involved in was one was called Smother that we did with BBC Studios distributing. Alibi picked up in the UK, but it's been shown in over 160 countries. And RTE and all the owners of the IP are all recouping their money now, which is brilliant. And then the second one, which is probably even better known, is Kin. So, Kin was something that came to us, a few years ago as a thing called Townsend. It was a very, very different animal to what it became. But I could see in that, pitch document, here was something that if we got the right international partners, could be something that could look every bit as good as anything you would see on Showtime or HBO. And then, we got AMC involved, we got Viaplay involved. Obviously, we got all the Irish tax credits, etc. And we put something on screen that did massively well in Ireland, but then, went on the BBC last year and Netflix and did extraordinarily well. And the number of people when I go to the UK who, come up and say, "Oh, I saw this brilliant show, Kin." I said, "Oh, well, yeah, my name's on that, executive producer." And that's been one of my babies, together with all the other people who are involved in it. But so co-productions are incredibly important in as much as all our drama is co-produced, and drama is incredibly important to any broadcaster because we're no longer just broadcasting in a linear fashion. We all have if you're a broadcaster, you've BVOD, broadcaster video on demand, like the iPlayer in the UK or ITVX, and in Ireland's case, the RT Player. And if you look at what is consumed on RT Player on an on-demand basis, two-thirds of it is scripted content. That includes soaps, but a huge amount of it is scripted content. So it shows the value of creating a catalogue of content. With my acquisitions hat on, I'm rebuying lots of stuff that I bought years ago, first time out, like Mad Men and, ER and Friends and all these kinds of shows. But actually, what makes us unique as RTE is our unique Irish catalogue within that scripted catalogue of things like Kin and The Gone and The Dry and Hidden Assets and and things that we genuinely co-produce with the BBC, like Young Offenders and stuff like that. But that is a unique Irish catalogue that you can't find in the one place on any other SVOD. So it's a smaller catalogue than Netflix or Amazon Prime, but it's a uniquely Irish catalogue. And my job has also been to negotiate long-term rights for that so that it can stay up on the RT Player for several years, and then we can talk to the producer about buying it again. And that works really, really well. So it was a drama. I actually wasn't involved in it, called Love Hate. And Love Hate was a gangland drama made about 10 years ago for RTE. And when Kin was doing incredibly well last year on the BBC, ITVX suddenly realized that there was this show that suddenly was spiking on ITVX called Love Hate. And I think it was because people in the UK loved Kin so much, they looked for another Irish crime drama, found Love Hate on ITVX, discovered that Love Hate had a younger Aidan Gill in it, had a very young Barry Keoghan, who at the time was being nominated for BAFTAs and Oscars, and it was a really good show. The good thing was that ITVX's license was running out, and so my colleague Adele Edwards, our sales manager, was able to relicense that to ITVX, and then ring up the producer, Dave McLaughlin, and say, "By the way, David, I've just made this not insignificant sale." So it shows the value of scripted compared to non-scripted. Non-scripted can do really well on SVODs as well, particularly series. But I think in terms of a long tail and longevity, I always liken good scripted to a book. You can go into a bookshop, you can go to Waterstones, and you can buy a brand new book. You can buy Sally Rooney's brand new book, but you can go there and buy Jane Eyre. If it's a story that is well told and the production values are good, people will come again. And the streamers have found that, and we found that with the RT Player. So our unique Irish catalogue, we need to create more of that so that there is, I say, a legacy of Irish unique content.
2025 represents a watershed in the international TV business with the absence of MIP TV in Cannes in April. So something that we've all become very accustomed to. We're on the cusp of the London screenings and also the new MIP London. You talked about your first Monte Carlo, but can you remember your first MIP or MIPCOM, and were there any particular standout moments?
We brought an Irish novelist down to MIPCOM for a drama that RTE had commissioned, and she just couldn't get over the pace. Equally, I do remember one Irish producer who brought down a drama series of her own, and she was trying to get meetings with people, and she wanted to pitch and maybe get people to look at it. And she said, I can't get over. People are just saying, what is it? Is it 6x1, 4x1? And she said, sorry, can I tell you about the program? Is it 4x1 or 6x1? I've no slots for 6x1. I have a 4x1, and is it post-watershed, pre-watershed? And she just couldn't get over, how the shorthand that is used sometimes to decide whether you want to buy something or not. And I think, yeah, it teaches you to be very decisive. And I think if you're going to be in acquisitions anyway, you have to be decisive. That's one of the things. You will miss out on stuff because of that, because you have to sometimes make a quick decision. But at the same time, you can't leave people hanging. If you leave yourself hanging, the thing might be sold to a competitor anyway. Or in our case, because what you've said beforehand about the spillover, somebody in the UK will have bought it and shown it. So by the time we show it, it looks like a rerun. So yeah, no, it was, I suppose the first MIPCOM, it was just, yeah, the sheer relentlessness and the fact that, yeah, you did a dinner at night and you probably had a couple of drinks after that, and then you went to bed, and 6 hours later you went again. So I always remember, yeah, the going out on the plane, on the Aer Lingus plane, and to this day this happens. Everybody's really chatty at the airport because the entire Irish industry tends to be on that 11 o'clock flight on the Sunday going out to MIPCOM. Everybody chat, 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 chat. On the way back, everybody is asleep before the plane even takes off. They're all entirely talked out. And people talk about going home and having, tin of baked beans and a mug of tea. My antidote when I get back from these markets, bizarrely, once I unpack, is to mow the lawns with a mug of tea. It's just you don't want to talk to anybody. You've done enough talking. Yeah, obviously you have to talk to your spouse and your children. But besides them, you're very happy just not to do very much.
And London screenings versus LA screenings, just any quick thoughts on the differences? And how do you perceive them? How do you manage and organize yourself in these two seemingly similar situations?
LA screenings is still a relatively small set of screenings because there's been a lot of consolidation in the industry. So you're probably at most going to go to 7 screenings over a week. Whereas the London screenings is much busier because you're dealing with all of the UK and European distributors and US distributors and trying to get them all in the one go. So they're different. They're both extremely valuable, and I think they cohabit very well.
Your career reflects so many positive qualities of loyalty, performance, delivery, consistency, and many others. But if you could have worked at another company over the last 30 years, which I think it's even 31 now at RTE, in Ireland or abroad, which one might have tempted you?
I probably wouldn't have worked anywhere else in Ireland unless I'd been an independent producer and set up my own production company. Because in a relatively small country like Ireland, only RTE has that ability to commission the range of programs across different genres and the scale that would interest me. Internationally, yes. I mean, I was without being specific. I was offered an approach for several senior jobs in the UK over the years, but I was very lucky that my kids were attending my old school, which became their old school, right beside the sea, 15 minutes from home. And so, I think raising kids in Dublin, it's great. You can get to lots of things, you can get to extracurricular activities, and so I was never fully tempted. But at the same time, I have to say I'm very lucky in that I have a job over the years that allows me to travel. And I do like to think that I'm one of these people who has a perspective outside of just an Irish perspective. And I do like meeting colleagues from all over the world. And so I love going to, places like Los Angeles and London and And then with my EBU hat on, all sorts of places. Our TV summit this year is in Armenia, for example. So that'll be somewhere new for me to go, and so that'll be fascinating.
And as one of the most experienced acquisition executives in the business, what do you think makes a good buyer, and also what makes a good salesperson?
Some of these things I've alluded to already. I think you need to be decisive. You need to be creative. You need to be very much knowing what's on trend and almost be ahead of the trend. You need to be persuasive internally as well as persuasive with salespeople, because you need to persuade your own schedulers and channel controllers that this is something new. This is a new trend. You need to go. I mean, I'm thinking of shows that I bought over the years, like Mad Men, Killing Eve, even Yellowstone. More recently, these are shows that weren't the most obvious hits. Crime Procedural is a more obvious hit, but trying to persuade people. So you need to be persuasive and get on with people. You need to get on with people, and be diplomatic. I think a good salesperson is somebody who, I would say, in terms of dealing with the likes of most of the buyers I know, is somebody who looks at ongoing business, doesn't just look in the short term. So any studio, as we said before, can have an amazing movie, the top movie of the year. If you massively take advantage of that one movie to do an enormous deal with a buyer who perhaps will get in trouble the following year because that deal was just too bloody expensive and the amount of inventory that came with it is too burdensome, it's going to backfire on you. So I would like to think that really good salespeople, just like the buyers, are diplomatic people who are persuasive, but actually understand that we both need to manage up and can show a level of honesty. Sometimes that comes across in the informal meetings rather than the formal meetings. Say, listen, to get this over the line, I really need to do this because there's a big number against this title or against this package, and work it through. So work together rather than do it just on an Excel spreadsheet. Here's my offer. Here's my counter. Here's my second offer. Here's my second counter. I think, talking and having a level of understanding, and, it can work for both.
And what would be the biggest lesson from your career that you would pass on to your younger self?
I would say build your network and never let that network, remain the same. Always grow it, grow it, grow it. I mean, particularly, as I pivoted and I've incorporated co-productions and essentially drama financing into my brief, I've only been able to do that because I have a network. And the same distributors that I'm buying from have an appetite for Irish drama, and they've built up a level of trust with me. And you find in this business that you keep doing, you keep talking to somebody, you keep meeting them for coffee or meeting for a drink or meeting them for a meeting, and there may be no business done between you for 3 or 4 years, and then suddenly there's a project. But because you know the person and you've built up a level of trust and you know a little bit about them, who they are, if they're married, if they've got kids, what makes them tick. But it's that build-up of trust. And I think that is hugely important. And it's something I've said to all of my children who are now all working adults, one in the industry, two not in the industry, but both working. Never confine your network to your immediate colleagues, your immediate school and college friends. Grow it, grow it, grow it. That'd be my maxim.
Finally, if you were putting together an evening of Dermot Horan programming, which 5 series or movies that you've been associated with would you choose for that schedule?
Now, that's I bought a lot of series over the years. So I'm thinking of which series were groundbreaking that I bought that I think have stood the test of time. So in no particular order, Band of Brothers. I recently watched Band of Brothers again. I downloaded it onto my iPad and watched it on the plane over a few business trips, and it really had stood the test of time. I mean, I love the movie Saving Private Ryan, which I also bought, but I thought as a series, Band of Brothers has absolutely stood the test of time. And actually, if I compare it to the Pacific or the recent Masters of the Air, they're actually neither a patch on Band of Brothers. It was unique. It's a particular story as well, where you really get to know that Band of Brothers. But I thought that's one. Very, very differently, Desperate Housewives. I remember going to Disney, and actually they had lost that year, and Grey's Anatomy. They had an amazing year that year. Of the three, Desperate Housewives was the one that I thought, actually, this is such a breath of fresh air. And, you know, it was funny just collecting my kids from school, or my wife collecting kids from school, and people just talking about watching Desperate Housewives the previous night. I'm thinking, I brought that to them. So it was something that was very, very different at the time. Um, Mad Men, I've mentioned Mad Men before. I mean, Mad Men was distributed by Lionsgate. They're a very small, up and coming company, but they didn't have a regular screening room at the screenings. There was a guy called Craig Sigelski who ran their sales. And I said to my colleague Brian, "Oh, listen, we're going to go to this other screening." He said, "Really? Do we have to go to this other screening?" I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." I said, "Yeah, it was off the back, and it was in a small suite, I think, in a hotel on Sunset." And Craig showed us Mad Men. And I just loved it, and I just thought this is again completely different to anything else I'd seen. Probably didn't rate as much as something like Desperate Housewives, but we've rebought it for the player, and recently it's done really, really well. It has stood the test of time. Friends. I picked up Friends. That was probably the first thing I picked up when I got my job. Yeah, and it's still. I mean, they'll never disclose it, but I believe it's still one of the top shows on Netflix to this day. It's probably a bit dated. It's probably not so PC anymore. But in its day, it just was a stonking behemoth of a show that just delivered every single episode. So that's there on the CV. And then maybe the last one, and I mentioned it before, but this is not one that I acquired, but I was exec producer of, is Kin. I'm kind of really proud of Kin. We're trying to make more series of it at the moment. But it just was I always felt it was a show that would pass muster with anything you saw in the US or the UK. And I think proof is that it's done all of that. And so I love that show in that, I was able to be part of a team that, together with David, our head of drama, that created something of that quality from a population of, 5.4 million people. So, yeah, that would go in my list as well.
That sounds like a very good night of TV programming. Well, Dermot Horan, thank you for being a guest on Here Comes Pod. I believe there's an Irish saying that says that two people shorten the road, and it's been an absolute pleasure to take this stroll down memory lane with you for company on that journey.
Thank you, Danny.